lost to Thanos in Infinity War, at the end of Infinity War, they were left hanging. We saw how frustrated they were. We saw how lost they were. They didn't know what to do. They were left hanging. They lost. Now what? It's a difficult moment of suffering and waiting. And reflecting on the epistles of Peter, that's the same thing that he's trying to address. The difficulty of suffering because you're being persecuted, and the difficulty of waiting for the promises of God. Welcome to day 5, the last of our reflection of the epistles of Peter. As I mentioned before, 1st and 2nd Peter seems to be about suffering and waiting. Suffering being trials of persecution because they were being hunted by the Romans. And then 2nd Peter is about waiting for the fulfillment of the promises of Christ. 1st Peter exhorts believers in a time of persecution. It's an exhortation, it's a motivation, an encouragement for believers to rejoice, to be hopeful, to be righteous, even when being persecuted. And then as we go to 2nd Peter, if you read it, you will realize that it is Peter's wake-up call to believers to stand firm to what they believe, stand firm in what they hold true, stand firm in pursuing holiness while waiting for the fulfillment of Jesus' promises. To not lose heart in frustrations and not be swayed by false teachings. And that makes the things from the epistles of Peter very relevant, especially today in the time of pandemic. Time of pandemic is a time of trials and suffering. It's a time of waiting. We're waiting, like, when will this pandemic be over? We're waiting for vaccines, and now that there are vaccines, we're waiting for which vaccines will really be effective. We're trying to assess the situation. Okay, should we take this vaccine? Should we wait for another one? We're waiting whether these vaccines will really take effect. We're waiting for the economy to bounce back. All this wait teaches us this principle that we can extract from 1st and 2nd Peter. Jesus' followers should stand firm to his teachings while waiting. Again, Jesus' followers should stand firm to his teachings, to the teachings of Jesus in the Bible, while waiting. Waiting for what? Because when Jesus left and ascended to heaven, he promised that he will come back. And then when he comes back, it will be the fulfillment of all the promises that God has given in the Bible. Jesus made this promise more than 2,000 years ago. So some people along the way, they realized, and this was addressed in 2nd Peter, that we've been waiting for so long already. When will this happen? Will it ever happen? But if we read the Bible, we know that there have been many occasions when long periods of waiting happened and people thought God will not fulfill his promise anymore. Yet he did. Jesus is actually a prime example of that. When Jesus came, many people believed already that the Messiah won't come. In fact, some people still believe that the Messiah hasn't come. They don't believe that Jesus is the Messiah. But he is. He has arrived. He is the fulfillment of God's promises in the Old Testament, the promise that was given through the prophets. It took a long time. Sometimes there's a period of silence from God. God will not speak to his people. God will not speak through prophets. And people would be impatient. They would think, oh no, maybe God doesn't hear us anymore. Oh no, maybe God has forsaken us. Or maybe, worse is, maybe God doesn't exist. Maybe God is not real. Maybe all this is just an illusion, an imagination. And some people fell into thinking those things. That's why Peter addressed that in his 2nd letter. And waiting is really not it's not an easy thing. I mean, come to think of it, do you like waiting? Maybe you don't. Actually, no one wants waiting. Nobody likes waiting. But if you want to be a better person, admit it, you have to learn to like waiting. Patience in waiting is always a sign of good character. Those who know God through Jesus Christ knows this better than anyone. Even in relationships, if you can wait, then it's a sign of good character. Even in food, if you can wait, that means you're willing to wait for a better food, for a better quality. If you're waiting for an artwork, for example, an artwork that was done hastily or in a quick way will be inferior to a masterpiece that was done for a long period of time. Waiting always yields better results. So waiting actually is a good character because that means we're willing to wait for better things. And if you wait a long period of time, we can see the fulfillment of God's promises. We can wait for the arrival of perfect things from God. Sometimes you just have to start with small things. Is it easy or difficult? You have to ask yourself, when you wait, do you find it easy or difficult? Because it can be a good test of your character. When you wait for small things and you find it very difficult, well, it just tells you that you have to learn to wait. You have to improve your patience. And the thing is, you can ask that from God. You can ask, Lord, teach me how to be patient. Lord, teach me how to wait longer. And we have to learn how to wait for the small things that we're asking, because eventually, in your faith, you will have to wait for a long period of time for the fulfillment of God's promises. Because that is God's way of testing your character. That is God's way of strengthening your faith. And if you think about it, God waited a long time for you. Maybe He's still waiting for you. But He's willing to wait always for you because He loves you. Patience is a sign not just of good character, but patience is a sign of love. God can wait for you because He loves you. Question is, can you wait for God?